You're nothing.
Mom, he has our eyes.
The chandelier light inside the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas shimmered against crystal glasses and polished marble floors. The annual Texas Entrepreneurship and Leadership Conference had just reached its peak. CEOs, venture capitalists, tech founders, media executives, every influential name in the Southwest filled the room. Cameras flashed in steady bursts. The keynote session had just ended, and the man everyone waited for had finally arrived. Rowan Callahan. At 38, Rowan wasn't just another billionaire CEO. He was the billionaire CEO, founder of Callahan Dynamics, the youngest tech magnate to take a logistics AI company global within 5 years. Clean-cut jawline, tailored navy Tom Ford suit, silver cufflinks engraved with his initials, controlled posture, controlled breathing, controlled expression. Control was his signature. As he stepped into the ballroom, reporters shifted instantly toward him. Microphones lifted. Phones angled higher. Security formed a subtle barrier around his path. "Mr. Callahan, what's your next acquisition strategy? Are the rumors about expansion into renewable infrastructure true?" "Rowan, any comment on the Forbes cover?" He offered the same measured half-smile that had built investor confidence for years. Polished, calm, untouchable. But across the ballroom, near the front of the stage, 3 small boys stood in matching charcoal blazers and white sneakers. 5 years old, identical curls trimmed close on the sides, bright brown eyes scanning the room with curiosity far too observant for children their age. They weren't looking at the cameras. They were staring at Rowan. The middle boy tilted his head slightly. His brows pulled together in concentration. He whispered, but 5-year-old whispers are rarely quiet. "Mom, he has our eyes." The words cut clean through the hum of networking conversations. A few nearby guests turned first, then more. Then silence moved outward like a ripple across water. Rowan paused mid-step. Security nearly bumped into him when he stopped abruptly. He didn't understand why at first. He just felt the shift, the weight, the sudden stillness. He turned and saw them. 3 boys. Identical. Brown eyes locked onto his. His breath stalled, not from emotion yet, but from recognition of similarity. It was subtle, but undeniable. The arch of their brows, the faint crease at the bridge of the nose when thinking, the quiet intensity in their gaze. Then his eyes lifted past them, to the stage, and that's when the ground beneath him shifted. Nyla Rivers stood at the podium, not in the shadows, not in the back row, not waiting for access. On stage, her posture steady, chin lifted, a fitted emerald green blazer sculpted to her frame, natural curls cascading to her shoulders, no visible tremor in her hands, no hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't the woman he remembered. She was commanding the room. The conference banner behind her read, "Keynote Panel, Resilient Leadership in Emerging Economies." Her name was printed in gold beneath it. Nyla Rivers, founder and CEO, Rivergate Transport Solutions. Founder, CEO. The crowd wasn't staring at Rowan anymore. They were looking between them, between the billionaire magnate and the woman whose name now commanded its own spotlight. Recognition flickered across Rowan's face, small, almost imperceptible, but real. Nyla's eyes met his. No anger, no desperation, just acknowledgement. The 3 boys shifted slightly closer to her. The room felt suspended in a moment no publicist could prepare for. Rowan's chest tightened, not because of scandal, because of memory. And for the first time in years, control slipped. Cut. 5 years earlier. Manhattan. Top floor of a glass-wrapped penthouse overlooking Central Park. The skyline glittered beneath a velvet night sky. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view that screamed power. The kind of height that made the city look small. Rowan liked height. It reminded him that he was above the noise. Champagne glasses rested on the marble island. A private chef had just left. Jazz hummed softly through hidden speakers. The evening had been carefully curated. Celebration energy, strategic networking earlier, then intimacy. Nyla stood near the window, hands folded lightly over her midsection. Back then, she wasn't on conference stages. She was a project manager at Callahan Dynamics. Smart, precise, The kind of mind that saw inefficiencies before anyone else. The kind of woman who spoke only when she had something meaningful to add. He had noticed her because she didn't try to be noticed. That night, she turned toward him slowly. Her voice wasn't shaky. It was steady. "Rowan, I went to the doctor today." He swirled his champagne once before setting it down. He didn't look worried. He didn't look concerned. He looked mildly curious. And a pause. "I'm pregnant." Silence filled the space between them. He didn't react immediately. He simply studied her face, as if analyzing data points. She continued. "It's triplets." That landed. His jaw tightened slightly. Not from fear. Calculation. Triplets meant headlines. Triplets meant timelines disrupted. Triplets meant legal exposure. Triplets meant leverage. He walked toward the kitchen island slowly, fingers tapping once against the marble. His mind moved faster than his heartbeat. Board optics, investor perception, brand image, succession planning. He exhaled once. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. No longer warm, no longer personal. Clinical. "Are you certain they're mine?" The question hit harder than a shout. Nyla didn't blink. "Yes." He held her gaze for 3 long seconds. 3 seconds that erased something between them. He straightened his suit jacket, posture stiffening into CEO mode. "You understand what this would mean, right?" he asked quietly. "For us?" she replied. "For me," he corrected. The air shifted. He walked toward the window, hands behind his back, staring at the skyline as though the city itself might offer a solution. "I'm negotiating 2 acquisitions," he said evenly. "We're about to expand into 3 international markets. My public profile is clean, structured, strategic." She watched him carefully. "I'm a billionaire CEO," he continued, turning toward her fully now. "You're not." The pause before the final word carried weight. "You're an employee, mid-level management, no board influence, no capital stake." Each sentence felt like distance growing in real time. She stepped forward. "This isn't a merger, Rowan. It's our children." He didn't soften. "I can offer financial support," he replied. "Discretion, a settlement. Whatever ensures stability, settlement." The word echoed. She searched his face for something human, something resembling the man who once stayed late reviewing her strategy proposals. The man who once told her she had vision, but all she saw was preservation, reputation over responsibility, status over fatherhood. She inhaled slowly. "You're choosing your empire," she said. "I'm protecting it," he corrected. Her shoulders squared. "No," she replied calmly. "You're protecting your image." Silence pressed in. He didn't deny it. That was the answer. 5 years earlier, in that penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Rowan Callahan chose elevation over accountability. Nyla reached for her coat. No dramatic tears. No raised voice. Just dignity. She paused at the door. "You said you admired my ambition," she said softly. "I hope one day you admire your own children." The door closed behind her, and Rowan stood alone, champagne untouched, skyline glittering, empire intact, or so he believed. A quiet stillness followed the memory. Then the narrative lens shifts back to the present, the Ritz-Carlton's ballroom frozen in tension. Before the story can move forward, the deeper layer emerges, the human truth beneath the chaos. This is where the area method begins to pulse through Rowan's journey. Attention, bold betrayal plus chaos. Some betrayals don't explode. They echo. Rowan's choices didn't storm through his life in one dramatic sweep. They waited. Waited in courtrooms. Waited in tax filings. Waited in the questions he refused to ask. Waited in every relationship he kept safely detached. But the loudest echo stood 5 years tall. 3 boys. 1 sentence. A mother whose silence spoke louder than confrontation. The chaos wasn't in the revelation. It was in the timing. Moments like this expose the cracks success hides. Relate power dynamics in race, class, and gender. The distance between Rowan and Nyla was never just about wealth. It was about who society elevates without question, and who must earn permission just to be heard. Rowan's world had always rewarded certainty, even when he was wrong. Nyla's world demanded proof, even when she was right. One had influence, one had consequences. In their private collision, the imbalance wasn't subtle. It shaped every word spoken in that Manhattan penthouse. It shaped every assumption he made. It shaped the cost she paid to walk away. Millions of people have lived that imbalance in smaller rooms, smaller arguments, smaller sacrifices. That's why their story feels familiar, even when the stakes are extraordinary. In Gage, everyone's felt invisible or underestimated. Nyla wasn't just dismissed, she was erased, reduced to nothing by a man who measured human value using the metrics that protected him: money, scale, brand, authority. She didn't challenge him that night because she understood something he didn't. Being underestimated isn't a defeat. It's an incubator. Every viewer has been there, passed over, talked down to, treated like the backup option, told indirectly or directly that they don't measure up. That sting shapes ambition in ways privilege can't comprehend. Rowan had power. Nyla had purpose. Purpose always outlives arrogance. What happens when the woman you dismiss becomes your legacy? The question isn't poetic. It's literal. Rowan spent years perfecting his empire. But the most significant chapter of his life was running around in tiny blazers, staring at him with questions only DNA could answer. He tried to structure his future, but life gave him a future with a heartbeat. 3 heartbeats. And the woman he dismissed, the one he assumed would fade into his past, was now the center of a global conference, standing with authority he could never claim ownership over. Legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It isn't built in press releases. It isn't built in investor confidence. Legacy is built in who carries your name, even when you tried to deny theirs. A direct, heartfelt appeal to the viewer. If you're here right now, if you've watched Rowan confront the moment he never prepared for, if you've felt even a hint of tension in your chest, pause, just for a second, because what you do next decides whether stories like this get pushed out or buried by the algorithm. I'm asking, openly, sincerely, please tap like right now, not later, not after the next scene, right now. Your single click tells YouTube. People want meaningful stories. People want lessons wrapped in real emotions. People want narratives that leave them thinking long after the screen goes dark. Your like is more powerful than you realize. Before we continue, drop this in the comments: character over money. Those 3 words shape Rowan's downfall and Nyla's rise. It helps the channel. It pushes the video. It signals to the algorithm that this story carries weight. But more than that, you're declaring something. Values matter more than titles. Integrity matters more than income. Responsibility matters more than status. Write it boldly, gentle but urgent. If you're someone who loves stories with depth, with lessons, with emotional truths that reflect real life, subscribe to the channel. Don't wait until the end. Join now, because the journey ahead only gets more intense. This channel is building a place where stories heal, teach, and challenge us to choose better. Where every episode isn't just entertainment, it's insight. Your subscription helps me tell more stories that carry weight, purpose, and heart. So please, like, comment character over money, subscribe. It changes more than the numbers. It changes the reach of stories that deserve to be heard. Nyla's earliest memories lived under stained glass windows and choir harmonies. Prince George's County wasn't just where she grew up, it was the soil that shaped her sense of worth, long before the world tried to define it for her. Sunday mornings carried a rhythm of polished shoes, pressed dresses, and voices rising with conviction. In that church, elders didn't just preach, they lived as examples. Her pastor spoke about dignity, not as something earned through accolades, but as something every person was born with. Those sermons weren't background noise, they etched themselves into her spirit. As a child, she sat between her parents, swinging her legs while absorbing lessons adults assumed she was too young to understand. You don't wait for someone to tell you your value. You step into rooms knowing it. The warmth of the sanctuary didn't make her life perfect, but it made her grounded. Faith wasn't a performance to her family, it was a compass. Even when her later life took sharp turns, Manhattan penthouse confrontations, motherhood, entrepreneurship, those early teachings whispered truth inside her. You were made with purpose. No one has the authority to shrink you. Outside the church, Another kind of community shaped her, one filled with laughter, quick comebacks, and unfiltered honesty. Her aunt's salon served as the neighborhood's round table. Every Saturday, Nyla swept hair, handed out magazines, and listened to conversations that bounced between politics, parenting, relationships, and dreams. The salon was a classroom without desks. Women spoke with a confidence unshaken by society's attempts to silence them. They celebrated milestones loudly and corrected one another gently. They uplifted, encouraged, and challenged each other to step into their greatness. That environment taught Nyla how to read people, not through fear, but through understanding. She learned timing in conversations, the difference between silence and hesitation, the strength in a well-placed truth. Most importantly, she learned that becoming a woman wasn't about fitting into expectations. It was about refusing to shrink for anyone. Those lessons stayed with her long after luxury penthouses replaced hairdryers, long after motherhood stretched her heart in 3 directions, and long after the world mistakenly assumed she came from nothing. She didn't. She came from community. In Prince George's County, community wasn't just a word. It was a system of checks, reminders, nudges, and gentle corrections. If Nyla skipped a school assignment, 3 neighbors would know before her parents got home. If she talked back to a teacher, someone from church would pull her aside to ask why her behavior didn't match her potential. It wasn't surveillance. It was investment. Adults in her life refused to let her fall below her capabilities. They reminded her that she represented more than herself. She carried the hopes of those who came before her. That responsibility did not weigh her down. It strengthened her spine. The result was a mindset Rowan never understood. You don't live solely for your own elevation. You live knowing your actions ripple outward. That sense of accountability made her fiercely intentional. It shaped how she handled pregnancy at a moment of deep disappointment. It shaped how she raised her 3 sons into boys with gentle hearts and bright minds. And it shaped how she founded Rivergate with a vision larger than profit. Community didn't just raise her. It prepared her. Long before she dreamed of running her own company, Nyla dreamed of walking across an HBCU campus. She grew up watching step shows online, scholarship announcements, commencement speeches filled with pride and tradition. To her, those universities symbolized excellence carved from resilience. She envisioned classrooms led by professors who didn't question her intelligence. She imagined dining halls full of peers who understood her cultural experiences without needing explanation. She pictured late-night study groups, mentorship circles, and internships that valued her ambition rather than treating it as surprising. That dream planted a belief Rowan's world never shared. Education isn't just about credentials, it's about identity, belonging, and purpose. She carried that mindset into adulthood. Even after attending a public university instead of the HBCU she wanted due to finances, the ethic stayed with her. Work with intention, move with vision, build with pride. Her rise wasn't accidental. It was built on dreams that refuse to fade, even when reality tries to dim them. Her father, Gregory Rivers, worked with steady hands and unwavering patience. He ran a small HVAC business, serving customers who trusted his honesty as much as his skill. He came home each night with calloused fingers but a calm spirit. From him, Nyla learned craftsmanship, not the literal kind, but the craft of effort. He didn't rush repairs. He didn't cut corners. He approached every job with integrity, whether the client lived in a modest townhouse or a mansion. He used to tell her, "Excellence is a habit, not an occasion." She carried that line into every professional space she entered. Project management roles, boardrooms, entrepreneurial meetings. Even when Rowan underestimated her, even when his tone cut her down to position rather than person, she never questioned her capability. Her father's work ethic existed in her bloodstream. It's why Rivergate didn't just succeed, it stabilized entire neighborhoods and offered jobs to people overlooked by larger corporations. That was her inheritance, not wealth, but standards. Her mother, Sabrina Rivers, taught literature at a local high school. Her classroom walls were lined with Black authors, poets, historians, playwrights, voices that narrated resilience through beauty. She raised Nyla on stories that expanded her imagination and sharpened her empathy. Characters became companions. Their struggles became lessons. Her mother often said, "Words reveal who we are when we're not paying attention." That line echoed the night Rowan cut her dignity with a single sentence. Words mattered. They shaped futures. They built or broke connections. Her mother also taught her articulation. When Nyla spoke, she spoke clearly. When she defended herself, she didn't shout, she reasoned. When she advocated for workers as her company grew, she used language rooted in justice and clarity. Her eloquence wasn't decoration. It was armor. It was leadership. And it was inherited. Sunday wasn't just worship. It was rhythm, unity, movement. The choir practiced in the mornings, voices blending into harmonies that lifted the mood of the entire congregation. Musicians tuned instruments, children whispered, elders swayed gently with closed eyes. In those moments, Nyla felt affirmed without speaking a single word. She watched her community sing through hardships, celebrate victories, and uplift one another with melodies that felt like strength in musical form. Gospel didn't teach her to avoid pain. It taught her how to carry it with dignity. So when pregnancy came paired with disappointment, when she faced the weight of raising 3 boys alone, she didn't collapse. She remembered the voices she grew up with, voices that rose even when life was heavy. That music built resilience in her chest long before she needed it. Her backyard growing up was a lively arena. Family cookouts transformed into thoughtful discussions about society, leadership, fairness, and future goals. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone was expected to defend it respectfully. Her uncle would challenge her views. Her cousins would push her to clarify her statements. Her parents encouraged questions without fear. These debates sharpened her mind. They shaped her ability to strategize, anticipate outcomes, and challenge assumptions. Years later, when Rowan undervalued her, treating her as an inconvenience rather than a partner in responsibility, she recognized his perspective instantly. He didn't see her as someone capable of standing beside him. He saw her as someone beneath him. That realization didn't break her. It clarified her path. Those backyard debates built the leader she later became. Everything about Nyla's upbringing pointed to one truth: value isn't granted by wealth, titles, or proximity to power. It exists from birth. Rowan tried to measure worth by hierarchy. Nyla measured worth by humanity. Her foundation wasn't built on external approval. It was built on internal grounding. This difference between their worlds wasn't subtle. It was the seed of every conflict to come. Her strength wasn't reactionary. It was inherited, nurtured, and reinforced long before Rowan Callahan ever entered her life. And it's why, years later, she stood on that Dallas stage not as a forgotten chapter, but as someone who built her own empire. Rowan's world began in institutions designed to preserve legacy. Yale wasn't just a university. It was a lineage checkpoint. His father, grandfather, 2 uncles, and older brother all walked the same halls. Academic achievement mattered, but image mattered more. Rowan learned to present success before he learned to feel it. He studied economics, statistics, and business strategy, excelling in environments where precision mattered more than vulnerability. At Yale, he formed connections that later helped him launch Callahan Dynamics. Every handshake came with future opportunity. Every internship was curated through family networks. The university didn't create his ambition. It reinforced the belief that ambition made him superior. Summers in the Hamptons were defined by crisp linen shirts, catered events, private beaches, and conversations centered around mergers, inheritance, and projected returns. Rowan grew up surrounded by expectations, not spoken but understood. You never appeared uncertain. You never leaned on emotion. You never broke the image of polished composure. Those summers shaped how he viewed relationships: structured, logical, transactional. They influenced his reaction the night Nyla told him she was pregnant. Not with fear, not with shock, but with calculation. Emotion wasn't welcomed in his world. Strategy was. His family's influence created pathways most people never had access to. Conversations at dinner revolved around fund performance, global markets, and philanthropy that doubled as branding. He learned early: connections open the doors. Money keeps them open. This network shaped his worldview. Anyone outside that orbit required scrutiny. Anyone without credentials had to prove themselves. So when Nyla entered his life, smart, capable, but not from his circle, he compartmentalized her, admitted attraction, appreciated competence, but never placed her in the same category as those groomed for his lifestyle. This conditioning widened the emotional distance he later used to justify his decisions. He attended charity galas from the age of 12. They weren't acts of service, they were stages. People dressed in luxury to raise money in front of cameras, exchanging smiles that never reached their eyes. Rowan learned to give publicly, not personally. To show compassion outwardly, not inwardly. To donate for recognition, not impact. It shaped the way he interacted with the idea of fatherhood. Responsibility to him was something managed quietly behind a signed agreement, not lived out through presence. Gala culture taught him to perform goodwill, not embody it. Which is why he believed offering Nyla a financial settlement was an acceptable response. To him, that was generosity. To her, it was erasure. In his household, emotion was treated like a liability. His father rarely smiled. His mother layered etiquette over every interaction. Rowan learned to compress anything that resembled vulnerability. He became a master at maintaining composure, unshaken voice, steady posture, measured tone. People admired it. Investors trusted it. Employees respected it. But emotional restraint became emotional absence, a polished void. So when he faced unexpected fatherhood, he reacted from conditioning, containment, not connection. He didn't recognize the harm because he didn't recognize emotion as a valid lens. This restraint created the fracture that would later confront him on a conference stage in Dallas. Every milestone in his life came with applause, grades, internships, startup launches, acquisitions. His worth, according to his upbringing, was tied to results. Winning validated him, losing diminished him. There was no middle ground. This belief shaped how he handled relationships. He stayed in control, avoided commitment, and centered logic above compassion. He believed responsibility was optional as long as success compensated for everything else. His downfall wasn't arrogance alone. It was the belief that worth could be quantified. That fatherhood was a risk. That love complicated focus. That image outweighed humanity. He never realized those mindsets would one day confront him publicly. Two Americas shaped two people who would eventually collide. Nyla came from grounding, faith, community, service, accountability, and inherited confidence. Rowan came from validation, networks, expectations, performance, and external approval. She grew from roots. He grew from structure. Their worlds didn't simply differ, they operated on opposite definitions of worth. This conflict didn't end in that Manhattan penthouse. It began there. Because a man taught to seek validation will eventually face a moment where validation fails him. And a woman raised on grounding will eventually rise in spaces no one expected her to enter. Dallas was just the collision point. The real story lived in the distance between their upbringings, and how those distances shaped every decision that followed. Callahan Axis Global sat 38 floors above Midtown Manhattan, a glass monument to Rowan's precision-driven leadership. The building's design reflected his personality, clean, structured, unyielding. On any weekday, the elevator lobby echoed with the confident strides of executives carrying tablets, laptops, and silent ambition. Inside, the air was always slightly chilled, intentionally set to sharpen focus. Large windows framed the skyline, giving the boardroom a constant reminder of the city's relentless pace. This was the space where strategy was shaped, markets shifted, and careers rose or fell based on perspective and preparation. For Rowan, this was home turf. For Nyla, it was the arena where she would first disrupt his certainty. She didn't walk in timidly. Her steps were steady, her expression composed, her binder full of data no one on the executive floor had bothered to examine thoroughly. She wasn't intimidated by the suits, the titles, or the long oak table that had intimidated countless new managers before her. She had learned long ago, value didn't come from furniture or formality. Her presence alone changed the temperature of the room. The meeting opened with a routine review of quarterly projections. Rowan sat at the head of the table, scanning charts with efficiency. Surrounding him were board members, division heads, and senior analysts. Then came the logistics segment, Nyla's domain. Rowan presented a plan to streamline distribution routes using a new AI model. It was polished, the type of plan most executives would approve without hesitation. But not her. She lifted her hand slightly. I have concerns with the proposed optimization model. Several heads turned. No one usually contradicted Rowan in his own building. He raised a brow, not irritated, curious. Go ahead. She stood, walked to the screen, and tapped a specific data point. Your projections assume stable supplier capacity across all regions. But the Mid-Atlantic has shown volatility for 6 consecutive quarters. We'd be scaling efficiency on unstable ground. The room shifted. Board members exchanged glances. Rowan leaned slightly forward. What solution do you propose? She clicked her remote, and the screen changed to a nested set of solutions, mapped clearly, elegantly, decisively. We need a dual routing algorithm, one that adjusts dynamically to real-time capacity shifts. It reduces risk by 27%. A director whispered, "She's right." Rowan nodded slowly, watching her, not the numbers. She didn't fumble. She didn't rush. She didn't shrink. Her clarity was unmistakable. And for the first time in years, someone had improved his work without undermining his authority. It intrigued him more than he expected. "Rowan, you built this model yourself." "Nyla, during the weekend." "Board member, this changes our entire risk analysis." "Rowan, show me the algorithm variables." She stepped closer to the screen, scrolling through lines of logic. He followed her movements with an attention he normally reserved for high-stakes investors. "Rowan, why wasn't this flagged earlier?" "Nyla, because the volatility pattern wasn't considered relevant. But patterns matter when they repeat." Rowan agreed. She glanced at him briefly. Her first acknowledgement that he was not the enemy, just the leader who had overlooked a detail she refused to ignore. It wasn't confrontation, it was clarity meeting precision. A pairing neither of them expected to feel natural. While Rowan seemed almost energized by the challenge, several board members shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to this dynamic, someone speaking with confidence equal to his in a space he controlled so tightly. A senior director leaned toward another. "She has too much influence already." Another whispered, "Rowan shouldn't encourage this. It sets a precedent." But Rowan heard none of it. He was studying the way she analyzed information, the way she anticipated questions before they were asked, the way she balanced compassion with assertiveness. It wasn't her boldness that unsettled the board. It was her competence. They recognized what Rowan hadn't yet admitted. She was not a temporary employee. She was a force. And forces disrupt structures that depend on hierarchy. After the meeting, Rowan remained seated as people filed out. He watched her pack her binder neatly, her expression unchanged from the beginning to the end, steady, composed, inwardly strong. "Rivers," he called. She turned. "That was thorough." "Thorough is required when the stakes are high," she replied. He stood. "Walk with me." She hesitated only long enough to measure his intention. Authority, not ego. Then she matched his pace down the hallway. "What drives you to work at this level?" he asked. "Responsibility," she answered plainly. "If I'm involved, I give all of myself." He looked at her with interest that wasn't disguised. "Most people give what's necessary, not everything." She held his gaze. "I'm not most people." That was the moment something shifted inside him. Not attraction alone, respect, the rare kind. Over the next few weeks, late-night strategy sessions became routine. The glass-walled conference room, usually quiet by 7 p.m., was illuminated by dual laptop screens, whiteboard markers, and takeout containers. Everyone else went home, not them. She worked with focused energy, precise handwriting, sharp insights. He reviewed proposals with her beside him, not across the room, not in hierarchical distance, side by side. He began to look forward to those evenings, to her perspective, to the way she approached problems from angles he hadn't considered, to her humor, subtle but disarming when she allowed it to peek through. One night, he admitted softly, "I haven't collaborated like this in years." She didn't look up. "Collaboration requires trust. And you trust me?" She paused, pen resting against the paper. "I trust the work," she said. "People earn the rest." It wasn't a rejection. It was a boundary he found himself wanting to cross, carefully. When sessions ended late, they walked to the subway together. Rowan insisted on offering her a driver. She always refused. "This city raised me in motion," she would say. "I trust my feet." He wasn't accustomed to moving through Manhattan without a polished vehicle or security detail, but walking beside her forced him into a pace he'd forgotten, human, unstructured, real. They talked about efficiency models, regional trends, and once, briefly, about music. He learned she loved gospel harmonies, Because they reminded her of home. She learned he spent summers in the Hamptons, but never felt truly relaxed there. Their worlds didn't match, but their conversations flowed without friction. The walks softened him. The laughter that escaped her occasionally softened her. The city felt different when she was beside him. Eventually, strategy meetings transitioned into penthouse dinners. He didn't disguise the shift. He simply said, "We work better without interruptions." But the truth was more layered. He wanted her in his space. His penthouse was pristine, minimalist art, polished floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. She noticed immediately. "You live like you're always preparing for a magazine shoot," she teased lightly. He smirked. "It helps with focus." She walked through the space with quiet curiosity, absorbing the lack of family photos, the absence of personal touches, the almost clinical order of everything. It explained more about him than he realized. During dinner, he asked questions no employee had ever heard from him. Questions about her family, her education, her childhood debates in the backyard, her faith. She answered, without oversharing. He listened, without judgment. Somewhere between roasted salmon and dessert, silence settled, not uncomfortable, but charged. He watched her with an expression she wasn't expecting. She inhaled slowly. Boundaries were shifting. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It happened after a night of long discussions, laughter that surprised them both, and a quiet moment by the window overlooking the city. She turned to leave, grabbing her coat. He stepped close, not imposing, just near enough for her to feel the warmth of someone who rarely allowed the world to reach him. For a second, neither moved. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked. "For challenging me. For seeing things I miss." Her eyes lingered on him longer than she intended. He reached up gently, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. She didn't step back. She didn't freeze. She simply looked at him with a question in her eyes. He answered with a kiss, slow, intentional, filled with a sincerity he didn't know he still possessed. She allowed it, not because of his status, not because of his power, but because the moment felt honest, and honesty was rare in his world. For all their closeness in private, late nights, shared ideas, whispered conversations, one truth became unavoidable. He never introduced her publicly. Not once. Not at internal events. Not at conferences. Not to colleagues. Not to board members outside formal settings. In the office, she remained Rivers, the talented project manager. At his penthouse, she became the woman he confided in, trusted, and held. But the two worlds never met. When she hinted once, lightly, not accusing, "Do people know we're close?" he responded with a measured answer, "Let's keep business clean. It protects both of us." She didn't argue, but she felt the boundary, a boundary that reflected everything Section 2 taught us. Her world honored relationships. His world hid them. Every private moment carried warmth. Every public silence carried a warning. He adored her privately, but he shielded her publicly, not from danger, but from visibility. And visibility is where legitimacy lives. A dynamic like theirs cannot remain untouched by consequence. His affection was real. Her trust was forming. But the gap between public acceptance and private intimacy widened quietly, steadily, unavoidably. He didn't realize the message his silence sent. She didn't confront it yet, because hope still softened the truth. But the seeds were there. She was good enough to advise him behind closed doors. Good enough to challenge him intellectually. Good enough to share dinners and quiet moments. Good enough to kiss in a penthouse above the city, yet not good enough to stand beside him in the spaces where his legacy was shaped. This imbalance would not explode immediately. It would grow. It would tighten. It would eventually return in ways neither of them expected. And one night, 5 years later, it would echo through a Dallas ballroom, in the voices of 3 identical boys. The seeds were planted here, quietly, inevitably. Their connection grew in private spaces, conference rooms at midnight, quiet subway walks, penthouse dinners that ended in long conversations. But intimacy without truth creates imbalance, and Nyla felt the imbalance settling like dust between them. So one Wednesday afternoon, after reviewing projections, she closed her laptop and asked a question that surprised even her. "Would you come with me to church this Sunday?" Rowan blinked slowly, as though adjusting his understanding of the moment. Religion wasn't unfamiliar to him. He had been raised with ceremonial traditions, but he'd never stepped into a place where faith was part of community rather than performance. He cleared his throat. "Your church?" "Yes," she said. "Prince George's County." He pictured her home, not through wealth or prestige, but through the warmth she carried. Part of him hesitated, not out of judgment, but because stepping into her world required vulnerability, a language he had never mastered. But he nodded. "I'll go." Sunday arrived, and they drove to Maryland together. The moment they pulled up, he saw families walking inside in colorful attire, children laughing, elders greeting one another with hugs that carried decades of shared history. Nothing about this place resembled the quiet, rigid sanctuaries of his childhood. Nyla's face relaxed the moment she stepped out of the car. Her posture softened, her steps grew lighter. He realized then, this was where she breathed without restraint. He followed her inside, stepping into a world he had never seen up close, and everything in him tightened with uncertainty. Music filled the sanctuary, full voices, vibrant harmonies, musicians playing with joy rather than formality. People clapped, swayed, lifted hands without self-consciousness. Children sat with grandparents. Teenagers laughed in the back pews. Community lived in every corner. Rowan stood stiffly at first. His tailored suit felt too formal, too cold, too corporate. He looked around, unsure where to place his hands, or how to follow the rhythm moving through the congregation. He whispered, "Is it always this expressive?" Nyla smiled. "It's always alive." A few members greeted him warmly, handshakes, smiles, brief introductions. He answered politely, but he wasn't used to strangers offering genuine welcome without expecting anything in return. When the choir began a powerful piece, the room shifted into unity. People sang with conviction that shook the air. Even the pastor spoke with a passion Rowan wasn't prepared for. Less lecture, more connection. He observed the ease with which Nyla blended in. She wasn't the sharp strategist or composed executive. She was simply part of a community that embraced her without conditions. At one point, she noticed his tension and whispered, "Just be present. You don't have to understand everything." He nodded slowly, but the truth was sharper. For the first time, he wasn't the most powerful person in the room. And it unsettled him. He wasn't unwelcome, just unrooted. The church wasn't evaluating him. It wasn't measuring his worth. It simply existed around him. He stood among them, feeling like an outsider in a space that shaped the woman he was growing to care for deeply. Weeks later, Rowan extended an invitation of his own. "My family is hosting a fundraiser in the Hamptons this Saturday. I'd like you to come." She glanced up from her laptop, reading the weight beneath the request. He wasn't asking her to join a corporate event. This was personal. This was access to his world, the curated one, the polished one, the one designed to maintain image. She nodded. "I'll be there." When they arrived, the fundraiser was already underway. Rows of luxury cars lined the driveway. Guests mingled under white tents, holding crystal glasses while discussing investment portfolios and charity partnerships. Photographers moved around discreetly, capturing images for society pages. The moment they stepped onto the lawn, heads turned. Not with curiosity, with assessment. Women in pastel gowns gave Nyla polite but strained smiles. Men offered curt nods. Every gesture felt filtered through silent judgment. Who she was, where she fit, why she was beside Rowan Callahan. A woman approached him. Someone from his family's social circle. "Rowan, darling, you didn't tell us you were bringing a guest." Her eyes flicked to Nyla. Not in admiration, in evaluation. Rowan smiled with rehearsed ease. "She's a colleague." The word hit like cold water. Colleague, not partner, not companion, not even friend. He walked off to greet a donor, leaving Nyla standing in a space where everyone noticed her, but no one welcomed her. As Nyla moved through the crowd, people acknowledged her only to ask shallow questions. "So what firm are you with? How did you meet Rowan? Are you part of the diversity development team?" Her qualifications weren't asked about. Her identity was reduced to an accessory, standing beside a wealthy man. She attempted to engage in conversation, but every sentence she offered seemed to fall into a void of disinterest. Guests saw her presence as a curiosity, not a contribution. At one point, she overheard two attendees whisper, "She's not from our world." Temporary, most likely. Her stomach tightened. Not from embarrassment, she knew her worth, but from the realization that Rowan hadn't prepared this environment to respect her. He had brought her into his world, but not into his standing. When he finally returned to her side, she asked quietly, "Do they always speak like that?" He sighed. "They're not used to new faces." She held his gaze. "They're not used to mine." He didn't respond, and that silence revealed the truth he wasn't ready to admit. He could face her world unprotected. She faced his world unacknowledged. That night, after the fundraiser, they sat outside on his penthouse balcony. The city glowed beneath them, calm, distant, indifferent. He poured wine. She didn't touch hers. He finally spoke. "I know today wasn't ideal." "Ideal isn't the issue," she replied. He exhaled. "They don't mean harm. They just operate a certain way. And you allow it." He turned toward her fully. "I can't change how people behave. You can decide how you participate in it." Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was steady, like someone identifying a truth rather than attacking a person. He leaned back slightly. "Why does this matter so much?" "Because environments show what people tolerate," she said. "And today showed me where I stand in yours." He frowned. "You're misreading it." "No," she said softly. "I read it exactly as it was." The space between them tightened, not with anger, but with truth long avoided. After a long pause, he reached out and took her hand gently, unsure if she would pull away. She didn't. He spoke quietly. "When I'm with you, everything feels clear, honest, direct. You see me without the headlines or the performance." She looked at their joined hands, warm, steady, complicated. "You make me feel grounded," he continued. "You calm the noise." His voice carried sincerity he rarely allowed himself to express. She lifted her eyes to his. "I'm not here to calm your world, Rowan. I'm here to be part of your life if you make room for me." His breath caught, just slightly. She wasn't asking for luxury. She wasn't asking for status. She was asking for truth. And truth required courage he hadn't yet developed. Rowan leaned forward, his voice lowering as though sharing something he had never spoken aloud. "You're the only person who doesn't need anything from me," he said. "Everyone else approaches me for opportunity, access, funding, or influence. But you look at me like I'm just a man, not a title." The confession sat between them, raw and uncovered. He continued, "It terrifies me, and it draws me in." His honesty wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was the closest he had come to vulnerability in years. But vulnerability without accountability is incomplete, and she knew it. She released his hand gently, not to create distance, but to give her words space. "You think I don't need anything from you," she said softly. "But I do." He swallowed. "What?" "I need integrity." The words settled heavily. "I need you to stand beside me in the light," she continued, "not just in private rooms. I need your actions to match your affection. I need honesty, acknowledgement, and truth, not secrecy disguised as protection." He stared at her, chest tightening, not because she was demanding too much, but because she was naming the very thing he had avoided confronting. She went on, voice steady. "I don't need your money. I don't need your influence. I don't need your network. I need a man who lives with consistency." Her eyes softened. "But I don't know if you know how to be that man yet." Silence expanded, not destructive, revealing. Rowan looked at her, realizing the crossroads wasn't sudden. It had been forming through church visits, subway walks, fundraiser discomfort, and the internal worlds they carried from childhood. Two Americas had collided. Two values had collided. Two futures were beginning to pull in different directions. Romance existed. Connection existed. But so did conflict. And the seeds planted here would grow into the reckoning, waiting for them 5 years later. The waiting room in the Midtown clinic was calm, painted in soft colors that tried to soothe nerves. Nyla sat quietly, her hands folded over her purse, eyes steady. She had already sensed the shift in her body. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't overwhelmed. She simply wanted certainty. A nurse opened the door with a warm smile. "Miss Rivers, the doctor is ready for you." Inside, the lights were soft, and a monitor hummed quietly. The doctor, A woman with years of kindness etched into her expression, greeted her gently. "Let's take a look and see how things are progressing," she said. As the ultrasound wand glided across her abdomen, the doctor's brows lifted slightly, not in alarm but in recognition of something uncommon. She turned the screen toward Nyla. "Ms. Rivers, you're expecting—" Nyla inhaled slowly, nodding with quiet acceptance, but then the doctor continued, her tone careful but warm. "And you're expecting 3—" A pause. "Triplets." The doctor pointed to the screen. 3 small forms, 3 tiny pulses, 3 beginnings. Nyla didn't panic. She didn't tremble. She didn't collapse into worry. Her breaths remained steady. Her gaze remained strong. "These are your children," the doctor said softly. Nyla rested a hand over her stomach. "I understand," she whispered. And she did. She understood the responsibility. She understood the blessing. She understood the challenge. What she didn't yet understand was how Rowan would respond. The doctor printed the ultrasound images, sliding them into an envelope. "I know this may bring up many emotions," she said. "Triplets require planning, support, and patience. But physically, everything looks healthy. You're strong, and they look strong." Nyla nodded. Strength wasn't new to her. Responsibility wasn't new to her. Facing complexity wasn't new to her. She held the envelope carefully, running her fingertips over the sealed edge. The weight of the news didn't crush her. It settled into her like truth, heavy but real. On the elevator ride down, she allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply. 3 heartbeats inside her. 3 futures tied to her. 3 lives forming with intention she didn't yet understand. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a new chapter she hadn't planned but felt prepared for. Her next step was inevitable. She had to tell Rowan. When she returned to her apartment, she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the envelope. She didn't pace. She didn't call friends in panic. She didn't rehearse speeches. She simply centered herself. Her upbringing had taught her that calm was not avoidance. It was discipline. She would not enter the next conversation as someone pleading for recognition. She would enter it as a woman presenting truth. She texted Rowan, "Can we talk tonight? I'll come to the penthouse." His response came immediately, of course. "I'll be here." No emojis, no hesitation, just controlled readiness, the way he handled everything. She placed the ultrasound images into her bag and prepared herself not for confrontation, but for clarity. Her calm wasn't detachment, it was strength. That evening, she arrived at his penthouse. The city glowed beneath the windows, reflecting off immaculate surfaces. He greeted her with a softened smile, stepping toward her. "You look serious," he said gently. "We need to talk." He led her to the living room. The air was thick, not with tension, but with anticipation. "What's going on?" he asked. She reached into her bag and placed the envelope on the table. "I went to the doctor today." His posture straightened slightly. She slid out the ultrasound images and spread them carefully before him. He leaned in, eyes narrowing to focus. This is—" "I'm pregnant," she said. He inhaled sharply, but not in fear. More, in disbelief. His eyes moved from the images to her face and back again. "And these are 3? He asked. "Yes." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then something unexpected appeared in his eyes. Warmth. "This is incredible," he said softly. "Nyla, this is—" But the warmth didn't last. It changed, shifted, tilted. "Just as you outlined. Rowan, how far along are you?" Nyla, 7 weeks. Rowan, triplets. "This is rare, significant, life-changing." Nyla, "I know." He moved closer, touching her hand. "We can make this work." She looked at him steadily. "How?" He hesitated. "We'll plan, we'll manage, we'll adjust schedules, set up the right resources. I can speak with my legal team." She pulled her hand back. "There it is." He blinked. "What?" "You moved from emotion to calculation. I'm trying to find solutions. I'm not a problem you solve." He exhaled. "This will affect the company, the board, the press." She nodded. "I expected you to consider that, but you didn't consider what this means for my position," he said. She stared at him, studying the shift happening behind his eyes. "Nyla, What do you actually feel right now? He opened his mouth to answer, but his face tightened with conflict. Love attempted to surface. Fear dragged it back down. Strategy tried to reshape it. Rowan, this could jeopardize everything I've built. Her heartbeat slowed, not in shock, but in recognition. Nyla, and what about the children? He paused. Too long. Far too long. She felt the truth before he spoke it. Rowan, we'll handle responsibilities privately, quietly, but public disclosure is out of the question. We need protections. She repeated. He straightened. You understand how the world works. I need to manage perception. Her voice remained calm. Say what you're thinking. He tried to soften his tone, but the words sharpened themselves. Rowan, you're not positioned for this level of exposure. That was the moment the distance between their worlds became undeniable. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. Her voice remained even. What does that mean? He swallowed. Then ego, fear, upbringing, and status merged into one single sentence. It slipped out. Clear, cold, unfiltered. I'm a billionaire CEO. You're nothing. The room froze. Even he seemed startled by the sharpness of his own voice. She stared at him for a long moment, letting the full weight of the words settle. Not because they crushed her, but because they revealed him. He tried to backtrack. Nyla, wait, that came out. No, she said quietly. It came out exactly how you see me. He reached toward her. I didn't mean. She stepped back. You meant every part of it. The only mistake was saying it out loud. Her calm made the words land harder than anger ever could. He looked at her with something between regret and fear. I just need time to adjust. This is huge. It is. But it's not complicated. She picked up her bag. Nyla, please, don't leave. We can fix this. Fixing it would require a foundation, she said. You just showed me it isn't there. She walked toward the door. He followed her. You're overreacting. She stopped, hand on the handle, turned, and delivered the sentence that would define their next 5 years. Her voice was steady, calm, certain, final. Then build your empire alone. No shout, no tears, no trembling. Just truth spoken with dignity. She opened the door. He reached out, but not fast enough, not courageously enough, not honestly enough to stop her. She stepped into the hallway and left, leaving behind the man who measured his worth by empire and the woman who understood her worth without his validation. The door closed. Quietly, completely, and the silence that followed was the beginning of everything that would collide 5 years later in Dallas. Before continuing to the next section, the narrator shifts gently toward the audience, inviting reflection. If you were her, would you stay or walk away? Comment below. Your voice helps stories like this reach more people. Drop your answer in the comments. Stay or walk away. The Charlotte suburbs greeted Nyla with soft morning light and quiet streets. Brick houses lined the neighborhoods in warm earth tones, and magnolia trees reached toward the sky like silent witnesses to new beginnings. She chose this place intentionally, not too far from her roots, but far enough from the Manhattan life she had walked away from. Her aunt lived here, offering her a spare room until she found her footing. The space wasn't large, but it was peaceful. The kind of peace she needed after leaving the penthouse confrontation behind. Each morning she sat on the small porch with a cup of ginger tea, watching the sun unfold across the lawns. Unlike Manhattan's sharp angles and loud ambitions, Charlotte moved with steadiness, a slower pace, a gentler rhythm. She welcomed the difference. Here, no one knew her story. No one measured her worth by who she had once been connected to. No one expected her to pretend. She walked the neighborhood in loose dresses as her pregnancy progressed, taking comfort in the hum of sprinklers and the distant sound of children playing. She breathed in fresh air that wasn't filled with tension. She slept without skyscraper shadows pressing against her windows. This wasn't escape. It was reset. A deliberate decision to rebuild without noise. It wasn't long before her aunt encouraged her to attend a nearby black church, a small but vibrant congregation with open doors and warm smiles. When Nyla first entered, she was greeted not with questions, but with welcome. The kind that didn't probe for backstory or motive. Her belly had begun to show, and several older women approached her immediately, with genuine kindness. "Oh, honey, you're glowing," one said, touching her arm lightly. "You sit right here. We take care of our own," another insisted. There was no judgment, no whispering, just community. After service, the pastor approached her with gentle warmth. "We're glad you're here, Miss Rivers. Whatever you need, support, resources, prayer, this house stands with you." Her throat tightened at the sincerity. She hadn't felt supported in months. Not truly. Before long, members brought her homemade meals, checked on her regularly, offered rides to doctor appointments, and helped her navigate the physical exhaustion of carrying 3 children. They saw her, not as someone abandoned, not as someone in crisis, but as a mother preparing to welcome life. The church didn't replace her strength. It surrounded it. Pregnancy with 1 child is demanding. With 3, every movement became a test of endurance. Her back ached constantly. Her legs swelled. Her breaths shortened. Her nights grew restless. But her spirit held firm. Some mornings she stood in the bathroom, pressing a hand to her belly as the triplets kicked with determined rhythm. She whispered encouragement to them, to herself, to the future she was rebuilding piece by piece. Still, she could not ignore the hardship. Her energy dropped sharply by the 2nd trimester. Carrying 3 lives forced her to move slower, rest more, and accept help even when pride resisted. Some nights she cried quietly, not from regret, but from sheer physical strain. Her aunt would hear her and sit beside her with warm tea. "You're not alone," she'd say. "You never have been." Those words held her together on days when fatigue threatened to unravel her resolve. She attended prenatal appointments religiously, taking notes, asking questions, absorbing guidance like a woman determined not to be caught unprepared. Yet beneath her resilience lay an unspoken truth. She had imagined sharing this journey with someone else, not out of dependency, but because parenthood deserves partnership. Instead, she carried all 3 on her own, and she chose to do it with dignity. By the 6th month, the strain wasn't just physical, it was financial. Her savings dwindled quickly. Baby supplies tripled. Medical visits multiplied. Even with her aunt providing a place to stay, she saw the numbers on her bank statements drop like sand slipping through fingers. She applied for remote work she could manage from home. Data entry, report editing, administrative consulting, small tasks that allowed her to rest between shifts. She stretched every dollar with precision her father taught her. Still, some bills were unavoidable. Her medications, transportation to appointments, specialized prenatal vitamins, ultrasounds. Each new charge reminded her of the vast difference between her world and Rowan's. Yet she never called him. Not once. Not for help. Not for closure. Not for acknowledgement. Her pride wasn't rooted in stubbornness. It was rooted in the truth that love without respect is survival, not partnership. The church offered support. Neighbors contributed gently, without pressure. Her aunt refused to let her feel like a burden. But some nights, when she lay awake with her hand on her stomach, she couldn't help whispering, "I wish they had more." Her tears weren't for herself. They were for the children growing inside her, unaware of the weight she carried. But she wiped her face and breathed deeply, reminding herself, "They will have what matters. They will have me." The night they arrived, the sky was filled with rolling clouds and a steady wind that rattled the window panes. Nyla had been feeling pressure all afternoon, but she assumed it was normal discomfort. Triplet pregnancies came with unpredictability. By midnight, the contractions hit with fierce certainty. Her aunt rushed her to the hospital. Nurses recognized the urgency immediately and guided her into a delivery room. The fluorescent lights, bright and sharp, contrasted with the calm she tried to maintain. "Miss Rivers, we need to move quickly. Triplets can come fast." She nodded, gripping the side of the bed as another contraction tore through her. Her breaths came in controlled waves, the way her church sisters had taught her. In and out. In and out. The medical team worked around her with coordinated precision. Her aunt held her hand. "You're doing beautifully." Nyla's eyes filled with tears, of pain, of strength, of the realization that she was seconds away from meeting the 3 lives who had changed her before ever touching the world. "Okay, Nyla," the doctor said. "Baby A is ready." She pushed. Her body trembled. Her heart pounded. And then, a cry. A strong one. "Baby boy, Healthy, the doctor announced. They placed him briefly against her chest. She inhaled his warmth, his softness, his tiny but powerful presence. His name is Caden, she whispered. Minutes later, contractions surged again. Baby B is coming. Her body strained. Her fingers gripped the bed so tightly her knuckles paled. Another cry filled the room. Another boy. He's perfect. She kissed his forehead, feeling her heart stretch wider than she imagined it could. Micah, she breathed. Exhaustion crept into her bones, but she wasn't finished. The doctor met her eyes. One more, Nyla. You can do this. She nodded, tears streaming, pain mixing with joy, fear mixing with triumph. The final push felt like releasing years of strength she didn't know she possessed. A third cry echoed. Baby C is here. They brought him to her, and she smiled through tears. Silas, she whispered. 3 boys. 3 beautiful boys. 3 pieces of her heart, born out of courage and conviction. The room quieted as the medical team checked each child carefully. Nyla lay back against the pillows, breathing unevenly, overwhelmed not by weakness, but by love so powerful it grounded her more deeply than anything she'd ever known. Her aunt kissed her forehead. You did it. No, she had done more than that. She had built a family from heartbreak, turned abandonment into purpose, turned fear into power, and turned silence into legacy. When the nurses finished their assessments, they placed all 3 boys in her arms, Caden by her left side, Micah near her heart, Silas asleep against her shoulder. Their breaths were soft, their fingers tiny, their presence overwhelming. She looked at each face, memorizing every detail, the small noses, the delicate lashes, the innocence untouched by the world's expectations. Her voice trembled as she leaned down, pressing a kiss to the crown of each head. You will never be nobody, she whispered, not said in anger, not said in bitterness, said in promise. You are loved, you are worthy, you are claimed, not by a title, but by a mother who will move mountains for you. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. They belonged to the moment. You are Caden, strong and steady. You are Micah, gentle and wise. You are Silas, bright and brave. And together, you are everything he failed to see. She held them tighter, her heart full. These arms, she whispered, will never let you feel the emptiness I felt that night. The boys slept peacefully, unaware of the vow being woven into the air around them. A vow of dignity, a vow of identity, a vow of truth. They would grow knowing their worth. They would grow knowing their mother chose them fully. They would grow knowing they were never an inconvenience, never a calculation, never an afterthought, and when the world finally brought them face to face with their father, they would walk with the confidence of boys raised in love, not in absence. The idea for her company came to Nyla quietly, during one of those late evenings when the triplets had finally fallen asleep and her home was filled with stillness. She sat by the window with her laptop open, looking out at the calm Charlotte night. Not long after giving birth, she realized something. Many communities had the will to grow, but not the infrastructure. Small businesses had passion, but lacked operational support. Transport networks struggled with inefficiencies that larger corporations ignored. She had once sharpened strategies for a billionaire. She could sharpen them for the people who needed them. And so, with determination forged from endurance, she registered her company, Rivers Strategic Impact, a consultancy built to strengthen small and mid-sized logistics organizations, improve systems, and empower community-driven enterprises. She didn't start with investors. She didn't start with capital injections. She started with knowledge and the discipline her father taught her. The website was basic. The mission was clear. The vision was rooted in service rather than image. Her first client came from her church, a local food pantry that needed better distribution scheduling. Nyla rebuilt their system in 2 weeks, and the efficiency increase stunned them. Word spread. Connections formed. Rivers' strategic impact began to breathe. Not fast, not flashy, but honestly, just how she wanted it. Success didn't fall into her lap. It arrived slowly, through hours spent hunched over spreadsheets, proposals, and performance metrics long after midnight. Her aunt would walk past her room and whisper, "Baby, sleep." But Nyla would smile and respond, "I'm building something." Some nights, exhaustion made her eyes blur. Other nights, Inspiration fueled her until dawn. She learned to balance feeding schedules with client meetings, nap times with strategy drafts, diaper changes with implementation plans. Her desk became a battlefield of ambition. Highlighters, client notes, stacks of folders, whiteboard scribbles, a mug of warm tea she never finished. Every late-night session reminded her why she left New York, why she refused to let someone else define her path, why she believed in a future her sons could stand on. The more she worked, the more she grew, not just as a strategist, but as a mother blending resilience with vision. As the triplets grew into toddlers, her home office transformed into a lively maze of toys, crayons, and miniature chairs. Caden often climbed into her lap while she typed. Micah lined up his plush animals along the windowsill like an audience. Silas scribbled on scrap paper, pretending to do work beside her. Their presence didn't distract her, it grounded her. Some mornings, all three would gather around her desk, watching as she explained what she was doing. "This is Mommy's work," she'd say gently. "I'm helping people solve problems." Caden would touch the keyboard, fascinated by the letters. Micah would point to the numbers on the screen. Silas would simply lean against her, content with her warmth. Her office became a symphony of motherhood and ambition. She never apologized for the noise they made. She never hid them during client calls. She never acted as if they were an inconvenience. They were the reason she built with purpose. One afternoon, while she reviewed a proposal for a regional delivery service, Micah climbed onto her lap with a question that made her pause. "Mommy." "Yes, baby? Are we rich?" She laughed softly, brushing a curl from his forehead. "What makes you ask that?" Caden said rich means you have a big house and big money. She set her papers aside, turning his face gently toward hers. "We are not rich," she said, "but we are responsible." "Responsible?" he repeated, unsure of the word. "Yes. Being responsible means we make smart choices. We take care of what we have. We help others when we can. We don't waste, and we don't depend on things to make us feel important." Caden, overhearing from the floor, added, "But rich sounds better." She smiled. "Being responsible lasts longer." The boys processed that quietly. Then Silas, the gentle thinker, said softly, "We have love." Her throat tightened. She kissed the top of his head. "Yes," she whispered, "and that matters more than rich." She didn't realize then how deeply that exchange would shape their characters as they grew. Her lessons became their compass. River's strategic impact did not explode overnight. It expanded step by step, consistently, sustainably, intentionally. She didn't chase every client. She chose work that aligned with her principles. Local trucking companies struggling with route design, small vendors needing supply chain insight, community organizations trying to stretch limited resources, entrepreneurs with vision but lacking operational structure. Each contract added a brick to the foundation she was building. She reinvested profits carefully, purchasing software upgrades, hiring part-time assistants, expanding her network. She learned how to pitch, negotiate, and adjust her pricing with confidence. Her reputation grew because her results did. Clients trusted her. Communities relied on her. Executives respected her. She wasn't building an empire out of spite. She was building it out of purpose. The contrast between her growth and Rowan's world would matter later, not because she aimed to compete, but because her foundation was rooted in values his upbringing never taught him to understand. Charlotte's business community welcomed her with a warmth that reflected her authenticity. Women's organizations invited her to speak about operational strategy. Local entrepreneurs sought her mentorship. Neighborhood leaders consulted her about resource allocation. But her deepest network came through the Black community that embraced her from the moment she stepped into their church. They believed in her. They uplifted her. They spread her name. A hairstylist recommended her to a boutique owner. A pastor connected her with a nonprofit needing logistics guidance. A deacon introduced her to a supplier struggling with inventory turnover. A young entrepreneur asked her to help structure her startup. Support flowed through genuine relationships, not transactional exchanges. One evening after a workshop, the pastor said to her, "You carry leadership with humility, Nyla. You build with intention. Keep going. You're lifting more people than you realize." Those words steadied her through moments of doubt. Her network didn't revolve around prestige. It revolved around trust, And trust created momentum. Nyla's story wasn't just about survival. It was about elevation through purpose. Her leadership emerged from experiences that shaped her. The dignity she learned in Prince George's County, the discipline inherited from her parents, the resilience formed during pregnancy, the courage forged in heartbreak, the clarity sharpened by motherhood. She led differently from the leaders she once worked under in New York. She didn't command through fear. She guided through wisdom. She didn't measure success in domination. She measured it in impact. Her presence in boardrooms, virtual or in person, challenged traditional structures. As her company grew, journalists interviewed her, panels invited her, organizations highlighted her work. But her purpose remained constant: to build systems that uplifted others, to prove excellence wasn't tied to wealth, to show her sons that leadership is responsibility, not status. She stood firmly in the identity she had reconciled through struggle. A strong Black woman, leading with vision, integrity, and legacy in mind. Her rise wasn't loud. It wasn't rapid. It wasn't fueled by entitlement. It was rooted in truth. And truth doesn't need permission to grow. Rowan Callahan stood center frame on the glossy cover of Forbes, his expression cool and composed beneath bold white letters. The architect of modern logistics. Inside, the article praised him as a visionary, a disruptor, a leader who transformed efficiency into an empire. His quotes were sharp, rehearsed, and crafted by a publicist who understood the value of curated brilliance. Investors loved it. Executives praised it. Employees circulated it with pride. But Rowan felt nothing. When he held the magazine, the weight in his hands didn't translate to fulfillment. The article highlighted milestones, acquisitions, growth charts, yet it ignored the moment that haunted him quietly each night. The ultrasound images he had placed inside a drawer. Images of 3 children he had not seen, had not asked about, had not acknowledged publicly or privately. As cameras flashed outside the building that morning, a journalist shouted, "Rowan, will legacy ever matter more than expansion?" He gave a practiced answer, but the question stayed with him. Legacy, a word he once assumed meant empire. Now it carried a different shadow. CNBC hosted him for a live interview on market trends. The studio lights were bright, the energy high, the anchor eager to highlight his next business move. "Mr. Callahan, you've positioned Callahan Dynamics as the pinnacle of innovation. What drives you at this stage?" Rowan smiled with precision. "Problem solving. The world is built on systems. I aim to improve them." The anchor nodded. "And your personal life? Any balance outside the boardroom?" He paused. Just half a second. But the camera caught it. The audience saw a man searching for a convincing sentence. "I stay focused," he answered. "That's my balance." The interview continued flawlessly, but internally, Rowan felt the hollow echo behind his words. He answered the anchor's final question with elegance, yet the emptiness beneath his tone grew louder. When the cameras shut off, the producer congratulated him. "You nailed it." Clean and confident. He nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. But confidence without grounding had begun to feel like a glass tower, impressive at a distance, fragile up close. Walking out of the studio, he noticed a mother with her toddler in the lobby. The child giggled, reaching for her necklace. Something in that ordinary moment tugged at him, soft but persistent. He brushed it off. But the tug remained. The Wall Street Journal profiled him as one of the top 40 under 40 leaders to watch. A reporter interviewed him in his office, asking questions about growth, competition, and ambition. When she turned off her recorder, she asked conversationally, "Do you ever think about what you'll leave behind, beyond business?" He hesitated again. He thought of the penthouse drawer, the pregnancy test still inside it, the ultrasound images he hadn't thrown away. The reporter noticed the shift in his eyes. "I mean children, family. Does that matter to you someday?" He deflected gracefully. Legacy takes many forms, but the lie lingered in the air like smoke. After the interview, he stared out of his office window, watching the city move beneath him in constant motion. People walking, taxis weaving, lives unfolding with complexity and meaning. He felt an unusual weight settle in his chest. Not regret, not yet, but absence. A silent, heavy absence. His friends continued inviting him to Hampton's charity events, Fundraisers, galas, gatherings full of wealth disguised as generosity. The settings were immaculate. Long white tables, curated menus, soft jazz drifting across manicured lawns. People greeted him with admiration. "Rowan, incredible quarter for your company. Love the Forbes feature. You'll surpass your father's achievements soon." He responded with polite appreciation, but their praise felt further from reality with each event. At one gathering, he saw a group of children playing tag near the shoreline, laughing, tumbling in the sand, free. He watched them longer than he intended. A woman beside him commented, "They're adorable, aren't they? Makes you think about having your own someday." She meant nothing by it. Just casual conversation, but the comment pierced him. Someday. The word echoed sharply. He turned away, staring at the horizon, wondering why the sight of children now unsettled him so deeply. Before leaving the event, he stepped inside the restroom, splashed his face with cold water, and stared at his reflection. He looked successful, untouchable, accomplished, but his eyes gave away something else: distance, loss, and a hollow ache he had no language for. Rowan's friends encouraged him to date again. "You work too much. You need someone beside you. You're too young to be this serious." So he tried. Dinners with polished women who understood wealth, etiquette, and networking. Conversations about art collections, real estate expansions, and international travel. They were all impressive, all articulate, all poised, but each date ended with the same quiet disappointment. Not one of them made him forget the woman who looked at him like he was human, not a headline. Not one of them made him feel challenged the way Nyla had challenged him. Not one of them spoke with conviction the way she once did, across a boardroom table. When one date asked casually, "Why aren't you married?" he felt a familiar sting. He gave a rehearsed smile. Timing. But timing wasn't the problem. It was conscience. And conscience does not loosen once awakened. By the fourth failed date, he realized something. No conversation sparked him. No connection felt sincere. No moment compared to the life he had dismissed. He began canceling dates altogether. Success remained, but fulfillment slipped further away. His penthouse, once a symbol of achievement, grew unbearably quiet. The floors echoed with every step. The kitchen remained untouched. The rooms lacked warmth, memory, and life. He found himself walking through the space at night without purpose. Standing at windows, sitting on the edge of the couch, turning on lights, then turning them off again. Silence had never bothered him before. He once embraced it as part of discipline and focus. Now it felt like a verdict. Some nights he tried playing music. Other nights he turned on the TV for background noise. But nothing filled the emptiness. He would pause suddenly, expecting to hear laughter or voices or footsteps, expecting something he never had, yet instinctively longed for. The penthouse didn't comfort him anymore. It testified against him. A life built on achievement alone creates a home that echoes. Inside his closet, tucked in the top drawer beneath neatly folded ties, sat the pregnancy test she had shown him all those years ago. He had meant to throw it away countless times. He told himself he didn't need it. He convinced himself it held no power. Yet every time he reached for the drawer, he froze. He would touch the edge of the test lightly, as though it were fragile, as though handling it with too much force would shatter something inside him. He never mentioned it to anyone. Not family, not friends, not his therapist, because he refused to get one. But the test remained. A single reminder that legacy had knocked on his door once, and he answered with arrogance. Some nights he found himself holding it, without remembering how he retrieved it. He would run his thumb across the faded lettering, wondering what the children looked like. Were they tall? Did they smile often? Did they walk yet? Did they say her name with affection? Did they ask about him? The questions unsettled him. He placed the test back carefully, as though returning it to a shrine he wasn't ready to face. Absence is not loud. It grows quietly. At first, he noticed it in his morning routine. He poured 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. He read through reports but felt no spark. He attended meetings but felt disconnected. Then he noticed it during celebrations. Champagne tasted flat. Success felt muted. Praise felt shallow. Then absence began tugging at him in unexpected places. Seeing fathers walking with their children in Central Park. Hearing toddlers laugh at a cafe nearby. watching coworkers talk about school plays and bedtime stories, observing families at airports during business trips. It wasn't longing for romance. It was longing for connection, for purpose beyond profit. He remembered the look in Nyla's eyes the night she walked out, calm, dignified, unwavering. She wasn't just leaving him. She was choosing her future over his pride. That truth lingered, quiet but persistent. He had not lost her. He had abandoned the version of himself she believed he could become, and in doing so, he abandoned the life that could have grounded him. Absence sharpened that realization daily. The turning point wasn't an event. It was a question that arrived one night, as he stood on his balcony overlooking the city. What is legacy? He had always believed it meant empire, dominance, market influence. He built everything around that belief. But standing alone, 38 floors above Manhattan, a different understanding began to take shape. Legacy wasn't numbers. Legacy wasn't valuations. Legacy wasn't magazine covers. Legacy was connection. Legacy was memory. Legacy was presence. Legacy was the people who carry your story when you're no longer here. As he stared into the night sky, he whispered to himself, "What will I leave behind?" The question settled into him like a seed, small but persistent. A seed that would eventually grow into movement, action, and confrontation. But for now, it remained quietly planted in his spirit. And for the first time in years, Rowan Callahan felt something he had never allowed himself to acknowledge: the weight of his choices, the depth of his emptiness, the possibility of redemption. But redemption requires truth, and truth was racing toward him in the form of 3 boys who carried his eyes. 5 years had reshaped everything. Dallas, once just a destination on a corporate itinerary, now carried an unexpected gravity. The Texas Entrepreneurship and Leadership Summit stood as the largest gathering of innovators in the region. Media crews lined the hotel lobby. Cameras flashed as guests entered, greeting leaders from every major industry. This year, the event held an unusual magnetism. The keynote headliner was Nyla Rivers, a woman who had risen from postpartum struggle and slow growth to become a respected authority in ethical logistics and community-centered operations. Her company, Rivers Strategic Impact, was now known for transforming overlooked enterprises into thriving models of efficiency. The summit organizers wanted a fresh voice, a grounded voice, a leader unafraid to tell the truth. They found her. As she stepped inside the Dallas Ritz-Carlton ballroom, dressed in a deep navy pantsuit that reflected quiet authority, the room shifted: recognition, admiration, curiosity. Behind her walked 3 boys, each holding a small backpack. Caden, Micah, Silas, 5 years old, lively, bright-eyed, and unaware of the storm quietly forming around them. They took their seats in the front row beside her team. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the ballroom entrance, Rowan Callahan had just arrived. The host introduced her with enthusiasm that filled the room. "Please welcome the CEO of Rivers Strategic Impact, an innovator, a strategist, and a leader redefining how integrity shapes the future of business. Ms. Nyla Rivers." Applause broke out like a wave. She walked to the podium with controlled grace. Her voice held clarity and calm. "Leadership," she began, "isn't measured by how loudly we speak, but by how consistently we act. It requires accountability, intention, and the courage to reject shortcuts dressed as opportunity." The room leaned in. She spoke about logistics, community partnerships, sustainable systems, and the responsibility leaders have to protect, not exploit, the people who contribute to their success. Her tone was precise, steady, balanced. Not once did she look toward the back of the ballroom, where Rowan had slipped in quietly, escorted by summit staff. He was a major sponsor this year. Callahan Dynamics had funded 2 panels and a networking lounge. He knew she would be speaking. He didn't know what seeing her again would feel like, but as she continued, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: a mix of admiration and remorse. Her presence commanded the room without raising her voice. Her words carried weight because they were lived, and every sentence illuminated the gap between who he had been and who she became. When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Even those who rarely stood for anyone found themselves compelled by her authenticity. Rowan remained seated for a moment, absorbing her presence. Then, almost involuntarily, he stood too. A staff member approached. "Mr. Callahan, would you like to meet the keynote speaker?" He swallowed. "Yes, but take your time." He needed breath. He needed ground. He needed courage he had never practiced. He moved closer to the stage area, staying behind a cluster of executives. He watched her shake hands with panelists, exchange smiles with fellow leaders, and gather her notes. She seemed lighter, stronger, more certain than the woman who once stood trembling in a Manhattan penthouse after hearing the coldest sentence of her life. He felt the weight of 5 years press against him. Before anyone could escort her to the networking lounge, 3 familiar faces sprinted toward the stage, Caden leading, Micah trailing right behind, Silas clutching a coloring book. "Mommy, you did it," Caden said, jumping into her arms. "You spoke so loud," Micah added proudly. "You looked like a boss," Silas declared with complete sincerity. The audience chuckled softly at their enthusiasm. Nyla knelt down, hugging them tightly. "I'm glad you were listening," she whispered. "But Rowan—" He stopped breathing. His eyes locked onto the boys, the same arch of brow he carried, the same thoughtful stance, the same shape of their eyes. He felt the truth hit him like a physical force. These were his children. The ones he had denied. The ones he had pushed into another life through arrogance and fear. The ones he had wondered about in the quietest corners of his penthouse. His pulse hammered. His hands went cold. He wasn't prepared for this moment. He wasn't ready. But moments don't wait for readiness. Caden was the first to notice him. The little boy paused in mid-sentence, staring over her shoulder. His brows pulled together, studying Rowan with the focus of a child seeing a resemblance he couldn't yet define. "Mom?" he whispered, loud enough to carry. "Yes, baby?" Caden pointed at Rowan openly. "Mom, he looks like us." The words didn't echo. They carved the air. The entire ballroom fell silent. Conversations stopped. Chairs creaked softly as attendees turned toward the unseen focal point. Micah and Silas turned too, eyes widening at the familiar lines in Rowan's face. Each boy looked from him, to one another, to their mother. The silence deepened into something electric. Nyla froze, not in fear, not in shame. In recognition, the moment she had long known would come, had arrived. No one dared interrupt. Executives lowered their drinks. Staff members paused with papers in hand. Sponsors forgot their talking points. A sea of eyes shifted between the 3 boys and the billionaire, who suddenly looked nothing like the man on magazine covers. Rowan took 1 step forward. His breath trembled. Another step. His voice, usually steady, caught in his throat. "Nyla." The name fell out of him like a confession. She didn't respond immediately. She simply placed one hand gently on Caden's shoulder, grounding all 4 of them in the moment. The room watched like witnesses to history. Because this wasn't gossip. This wasn't scandal. This was truth walking into the light. When their eyes finally met, the world around them dissolved into background noise. Rowan saw everything at once. The strength she built. The years he missed. The children he never held. The life that continued without him. Her gaze was not angry. It wasn't bitter. It was steady, deeply steady, a quiet storm of clarity. He mouthed silently, "I'm sorry." She didn't look away. She had no obligation to soften the moment. No duty to save him from the truth. No desire to erase the choices he made. Their shared past flickered between them like fragments of memory. The penthouse, the argument, the sentence that ended everything, the door closing, her silence afterward. Then the years that shaped them into 2 different worlds. Her eyes held all of it. His eyes finally understood it. Without thinking, without planning, Rowan lowered himself to 1 knee in front of the boys. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't grand. It wasn't for the room. It was instinct, recognition, a man stripped of pride. The boys watched him cautiously. He looked at each of them carefully, reverently, as if memorizing faces that had lived in the quiet corners of his conscience. He swallowed hard. "You're real," he whispered. Caden tilted his head. "Of course we're real," Micah added. "Are you okay?" Silas stepped closer, gripping his coloring book. "Why do you look sad?" Rowan's voice cracked. "I'm just overwhelmed." He glanced at Nyla again. She gave no cue, no push, no permission. This moment belonged to him and the boys. He turned back to them. "My name is Rowan," he said quietly. Caden studied him. "Like the tree?" Rowan smiled despite himself. "Yes, like the tree." Silas leaned closer. "Do you know us?" He inhaled sharply. The truth pressed against his ribs. "Not yet," he whispered. "But I want to." Rowan's eyes welled, not performatively, not theatrically, but with a depth he had never allowed himself to feel. "I've thought about you," he said, voice uneven. "Every day for years." The boys exchanged glances. Micah stepped forward first. His voice was soft. "Did you know our names?" Rowan shook his head, pain flickering through him. "No. But I want to hear them from you." Caden lifted his chin proudly. "I'm Caden." "Caden," Rowan repeated, voice gentle, reverent. "Strong name." Micah smiled. "I'm Micah." "Micah," Rowan echoed. "Wise name." Silas lifted his coloring book slightly. "I'm Silas." "Silas," Rowan whispered. "Brave name." He looked back at Nyla, breathing shakily. "You chose beautifully." She didn't respond. Her expression remained steady, giving space for truth to unfold. The boys continued watching him with open curiosity. Silas tugged on his sleeve. "Why are your eyes shiny?" "Because," Rowan whispered, "I'm meeting something I should have honored a long time ago." The honesty in his voice softened the room. People blinked away unexpected emotion. Some looked down, giving the moment privacy. Others watched with understanding. This wasn't spectacle. This was reckoning. Now came the moment that could not hide behind gestures. Rowan exhaled, steadying himself. He turned to Nyla. "May I speak with you?" She nodded once. "Speak." He rose to his feet, but his posture remained humble. "I was wrong," he began. "Not just in the words I said, but in the beliefs behind them. I chose status over responsibility, strategy over humanity, fear over courage." She held his gaze. "You did," he continued, voice shaking. "I thought empire made me powerful, but it made me empty. The silence in my home, the distance in my life, it wasn't success. It was consequence." Her breath remained controlled. "You thought your name defined worth," she said calmly. "But worth existed before you." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." She stepped closer, not softening, but clarifying. "You left me to carry 3 lives alone." "Yes," he whispered, "and I regret it every day." She didn't rescue him from the weight. "You abandoned fatherhood before it began." "I know. You denied them without knowing their faces." He swallowed painfully. "Yes." The boys listened quietly, sensing the seriousness but not the history. Then Rowan spoke with full sincerity. "I don't expect forgiveness today. I don't expect access. I don't expect position in their lives. I only ask for a chance to earn responsibility, not with words, but with consistency." Her eyes softened, not in acceptance, but in recognition of the honesty she'd once wished for. "You will have to prove everything," she said, "not to me, to them." He nodded, wiping a tear discreetly. "I will." Caden whispered, "Mom, is he? Are we?" She knelt, pulling all 3 boys close. "This is someone we'll learn about slowly," she said. "Together. Safely." They nodded. Rowan breathed out, a breath 5 years in the making, and the room exhaled with him. The ballroom slowly returned to motion, but not fully. People whispered, traded glances, stepped back to give them space, but no one left. Everyone sensed that something deeper was unfolding, something that went beyond surprise or scandal. Nyla placed a gentle hand on Silas's shoulder and guided the boys to stand beside her. Her posture was firm, protective, grounded. Rowan steadied himself, feeling the floor beneath him as if gravity had changed its rules. For a moment, the space held only breathing. Hers, his, the boys. Then Rowan spoke softly. "Is there anything I should know now?" The question came from humility, not entitlement. Nyla inhaled slowly, preparing herself. She knew this conversation couldn't be delayed. Not with the children present, not with the audience witnessing the truth with respectful distance, not after the years of separation. She looked at him directly. "There is something," she said. Rowan's chest tightened. Her voice remained steady. "I never put your name on their birth certificates." The room stilled again, but in a different way. A more intimate silence. A silence of realization. Rowan blinked, stunned not by accusation, but by the clarity of her decision. "You didn't?" he asked quietly. "No," she answered. "Not once." His mind raced for reasons: anger, retaliation, punishment. But her face held none of those emotions. She spoke before he could assume the wrong thing. "It wasn't revenge," she said plainly. The simplicity of her tone tightened something inside him. "It wasn't anger," she continued, "not even disappointment." Caden squeezed her fingers gently. Micah leaned slightly against her arm. Silas watched Rowan with hesitant curiosity. She looked down at the boys with love before raising her eyes back to Rowan. "I didn't keep your name off out of spite," she said. "I kept it off out of intention." Rowan exhaled shakily. "What intention?" "To protect their identity," she said. "To protect their peace. To protect the story they would grow into when they were ready." She paused. "And to protect you." His breath caught. "Protect him? After everything?" Her composure didn't waver. "Yes," she said quietly. "You too." She took one small step closer, not as reconciliation, but as clarity. "You weren't ready," she said. "Not emotionally, not morally, not structurally. You were buried in ambition, surrounded by people who expected perfection and left no room for truth." He swallowed hard. "I didn't want to drag you into fatherhood through obligation," she continued. "I didn't want our sons to be the result of pressure." Her words were not wrapped in blame. They were wrapped in understanding. "You needed to choose them," she said. "Not because of law, not because of DNA, not because of fear." Her voice softened with unmistakable strength. "But because something inside you was finally willing to love without calculation." The boys watched both adults carefully, absorbing tone, if not meaning. Rowan's eyes glistened, raw, vulnerable. "You gave me the choice," he whispered. She nodded. "It's the one thing I could give that mattered." Nyla looked down at her children briefly, brushing a curl from Caden's forehead, steadying herself to speak the truth he deserved to hear. "When they were born," she said slowly, "I knew your world came with attention. Headlines, spotlight, resources, yes, but also scrutiny." Rowan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "I never wanted the tabloids to plaster them across a cover as Callahan's secret children. I never wanted them dissected, judged, tracked, or photographed outside their daycare." Her voice thickened just slightly, though she did not crumble. "I wanted them to grow up laughing, learning, playing, without the shadow of your name hanging over their innocence." He closed his eyes briefly, not in shame. "In realization," she continued. "You know what your world is like. One whisper becomes news. One photo becomes speculation. One mistake becomes a headline." Her tone grew protective. "I wasn't willing to let 3 boys pay the price for a world that never protected me." The honesty strengthened the moment, turning it into something sacred. But then her tone shifted again. Softer, lower, deeper. "And I protected you too." His eyes snapped open. "You?" he asked. "Protected me?" She nodded. "If I had put your name on any form, media outlets would have traced it. Your board would have known. Investors would have speculated. Competitors would have used it. And your career, your reputation, would have taken a hit." She didn't say this with admiration. She said it with truth. "You weren't ready to be associated with 3 children overnight," she said. "Not emotionally, not publicly, not structurally." He listened with growing disbelief. "And I wasn't willing to give anyone the chance to weaponize them against you." His throat tightened painfully. "I didn't want you destroyed," she said. "I wanted you to grow, even if it wasn't for us." He blinked. Hard. He had spent years believing he was the one protecting image. He had weaponized that belief. He had sacrificed her to maintain it. Yet she had quietly done for him what he refused to do for her, protected dignity. The realization hit him with quiet violence. The very shield he had used to justify pushing her away, his reputation, she had guarded it more fiercely than he ever did. He remembered every moment, the penthouse, the heated words, his cold declaration, her silent exit. He thought she left to free herself from him. He never considered she left to save him from himself. He felt breathless. His voice cracked. You carried all of that alone? Yes. You shielded me. Even after what I said to you? Yes. You never once tried to expose me or use the boys to force me to step up. Never. His voice dropped into something raw, almost unrecognizable. Why? She took a slow, steady breath. Because I don't believe in destroying someone to prove I was hurt. Her voice remained calm but powerful. And because I wanted my sons to see strength, not retaliation. I wanted them to understand dignity, not desperation. He pressed his hand over his mouth, processing the truth with difficulty. And more than anything, she added, I wanted you to meet them one day without resentment in your heart. He lowered his hand, tears now visible. You gave me a chance I didn't deserve, he whispered. No, she corrected gently. I gave the boys a chance to grow without chaos. What you do with this moment now, that part is your responsibility. Until this moment, Rowan had believed he held all the power. His money, his company, his influence, his image. But standing here, with the truth laid bare, he realized how powerless he had actually been. He thought she was the one left behind. He thought she was the one who had to rebuild. He thought she was the one carrying loss. But she hadn't lost. She had built. She had risen. She had mothered 3 beautiful boys with honor. She had protected them with strategy deeper than his own. She had lived with grace he couldn't comprehend at the time. And in doing so, she became what he always admired but never understood, a leader. A real one. The emotional reversal was absolute. He wasn't the benevolent figure in her story. He was the lesson. She wasn't the one abandoned. She was the one strengthened. He wasn't the center of her world. He was the one who drifted from his own center. And she had become the kind of legacy builder he once believed only existed in boardrooms. He exhaled shakily. Nyla, he whispered. I don't know how to repair what I broke. She didn't smile. She didn't comfort him. She didn't minimize the truth. She simply said, start with honesty. Everything else will come after. He nodded slowly. And for the first time, truly, completely, he understood that redemption begins at the feet of truth. Before moving to the next chapter, the narrator turns gently toward the audience. If you believe children deserve presence, comment present. Your engagement helps powerful stories like this reach others who need them. Drop present in the comments to support narratives built on accountability, growth, and real transformation. After the collision in the ballroom, Summit staff discreetly guided Nyla, Rowan, and the boys into a private hospitality room. The space was quiet, soft carpet, dimmed lighting, bottled water on a small table. A single window overlooked the Dallas skyline, glowing beneath the evening sky. Her team took the boys outside to grab snacks, promising to stay nearby. The door closed gently, and suddenly, the world shrank to 2 people who hadn't spoken honestly in 5 years. Nyla stood near the window, arms folded, not cold, but centered. Rowan remained near the door, unsure of whether he deserved to move closer. He took a slow breath. Thank you for agreeing to speak here, he said softly. She didn't respond immediately. She looked out at the skyline, allowing silence to stretch just enough to make him sit with his discomfort. Finally she turned. We needed this conversation, she said. Her tone wasn't sharp, but it was firm, an anchor planted in truth. Rowan nodded. Yes, we did. The room carried a heaviness neither tried to escape. Rowan stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, like someone approaching a truth he could no longer avoid. I want to start with something simple, he said. I'm sorry. The apology wasn't polished. It wasn't packaged for public perception. It wasn't shaped by advisors or rehearsed in a mirror. It trembled. I'm sorry for what I said in the penthouse, he continued. I'm sorry for choosing image over responsibility. I'm sorry for letting fear speak louder than love. I'm sorry for leaving you alone in moments I should have stood beside you. He paused, voice cracking slightly. You deserved support. You deserved honesty. You deserved someone who recognized your strength instead of trying to diminish it. She watched him quietly, her face unreadable. He lowered his gaze. And our sons. His throat tightened. I'm sorry for missing their first steps, their first words, their milestones. I'm sorry for every moment you carried alone. He took a long, unsteady breath. I can't change the years I lost, but I can acknowledge the pain I caused. Silence thickened the air. Not avoidance, processing. Nyla closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of words she never believed she'd hear from him. When she opened her eyes, she exhaled. That sounded real, she said. It is. She studied his face carefully, searching for signs of performance. Tight jaw, defensive posture, veiled tone, but none appeared. His voice was stripped of power. His expression was stripped of distance. He stood not as Rowan Callahan, global CEO, but as Rowan, the man who finally faced the consequences of his choices. You're not performing for the room? She asked. Not for the summit, not for the press waiting outside. He shook his head. I don't care what the press thinks. Not right now. Not compared to this. She held his gaze. You don't need anything from me to improve your image. No, he said. I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here as someone who caused harm and needs to take responsibility. Her expression softened, a fraction. But softness was not forgiveness. Rowan stepped back slightly, giving her space. My ego. It built walls I didn't know how to lower, he said. Every decision I made back then came from a place of fear disguised as control. He inhaled deeply. I was raised to believe that vulnerability was weakness, that asking for help was losing, that admitting failure was unacceptable. He paused. I let that mindset push you away. She nodded slowly. You did? His shoulders dropped. And when you walked out, I let pride convince me that silence was strength, that ignoring the truth would make it disappear. His voice trembled with honesty, but the truth didn't disappear. It lived in the spaces I tried to avoid. She remained silent, allowing the confession to stand. He continued, quieter now. You deserve someone capable of humility, someone who can admit he was wrong. His hands shook slightly. I'm trying to become that man. Nyla walked toward him, not aggressively, not gently, but with purpose. The moment called for clarity, not comfort. She stood a few feet away, her posture tall, her breath steady. Rowan, she said firmly. He looked up. You didn't lose us because of money. The words hit him immediately, not as accusation, but as truth unveiled. She stepped closer. You lost us because of pride. The statement landed like a verdict, but a truthful one. You let your title speak louder than your heart. You let fear silence responsibility. You believed your world had more value than ours. You thought control made you strong. Her tone was not emotional. It was factual. And in the end, she said, it wasn't the lack of resources that separated us. It was the lack of humility. He closed his eyes, the truth settling on him like a weight he finally deserved to feel. I know, he whispered. No, she said gently. You're beginning to know. But understanding takes time. Her words were not cruel. They were protective, of herself, of her sons, of the truth. He opened his eyes again, red, tired, but present. What do I need to do? He asked quietly. First, she said, you need to show up. He nodded. Not with gifts, not with money, not with announcements. Her voice remained calm. With presence. He listened as if absorbing instructions for a life he had never learned to live. You need to learn who they are, she added. What they like, what they fear, how they think. They're not symbols of opportunity, they're children. I know, he whispered. No, she corrected. You're learning. She paced slowly, thinking carefully. Second, she continued, you need consistency, not bursts of effort, not emotional reactions. Consistency is what children trust. He nodded again, slower this time. Third, she said, you need to accept that trust isn't automatic. You have to earn it, day by day, step by step. His voice cracked. And you? How do I rebuild trust with you? She paused. This question required a deeper answer. Trust with me, she said slowly, begins with acknowledging the version of yourself that hurt me, and actively choosing not to return to him. He swallowed hard. It means transparency, communication, respect, patience. She looked out the window again. And it means understanding that rebuilding isn't the same as returning. Our past doesn't guarantee a future. It only gives us lessons. He nodded softly, absorbing every word. He didn't argue. He didn't push. He didn't try to negotiate a faster path. And that, ironically, was the first step toward earning trust. Rowan waited, uncertain of whether he should speak again. Nyla broke the silence. "I need you to understand something," she said. Her tone shifted, firmer, deeper, protective. "I don't forgive easily." He took in a shaky breath. I don't expect immediate forgiveness." She shook her head gently. "No. Listen." He quieted. "What happened in the penthouse wasn't just a harsh moment. It was a defining one. It taught me how quickly love can be replaced by ego. It forced me to raise 3 children without their father. It shaped our lives for years." She stepped closer, not closing the gap entirely, but enough for her truth to land with clear intention. "Forgiveness isn't impossible," she said. "But it isn't owed, and it isn't fast." He nodded slowly, painfully, respectfully. She continued, "You need to show me that the man standing here is not the man who pushed me out of his life." He swallowed. "I want to be better," he whispered. "Not for image, not for press, for them, and for myself." She held his gaze. "And for me?" He hesitated, not in doubt, but in careful honesty. "Yes," he said, "but only if I earn that place. Not because I want comfort, because I want accountability." She nodded once, approval of the right answer, not approval of him. "We'll take this slowly," she said. "For their sake, for mine, and for yours." He breathed out, a long, trembling release. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just follow through." The door opened softly as the boys peeked in, snacks in hand, energy restored. "Mom, can we come in now?" Caden asked. Nyla smiled softly. "Yes, baby. Come in." The boys ran to her eagerly. Rowan watched them with reverence, aware that everything from this moment forward was a chance to rise or repeat. This time, he intended to rise. The weeks following the summit were not smooth. They were cautious, intentional, slow. Nyla didn't open her schedule completely, and Rowan didn't push. Instead, he approached fatherhood the same way he once approached business, except this time, he led with humility, not ambition. Their first meeting outside the summit happened at a family-friendly cafe. The boys were shy but curious, sitting close to their mother while Rowan kept a respectful distance. He didn't overwhelm them with gifts or promises. He didn't speak loudly to fill silence. He didn't force closeness. He simply showed up. Every week, he continued showing up. Sometimes the boys asked questions. "Do you like Legos? Can you run fast? Why is your hair like ours?" Other times they ignored him completely, too busy drawing superheroes or trying to outrun each other. He accepted every moment with gratitude. Because presence wasn't glamorous. Presence was quiet. Presence demanded consistency. Presence required patience. He didn't ask for more time than he was offered. He didn't overstep boundaries. He earned his access slowly, brick by brick, moment by moment, truth by truth. And each time he walked away, he felt lighter. Not because he'd achieved something, but because fatherhood had begun to teach him how to be human again. 3 months later, Nyla invited him to the boys' first school performance. It was a second-grade careers parade, where students dressed up as what they wanted to be when they grew older. The gym buzzed with energy, bright posters taped to the walls, tiny voices echoing with excitement. Rowan arrived early and sat in the back row, nervous, grateful, unsure. When the boys walked in wearing cardboard badges labeled Engineer, Caden Teacher, Micah Scientist, Silas, something in Rowan's chest tightened with awe. They spotted their mother first, running over to wave excitedly. Then they saw him. Silas lifted a hand shyly. Micah offered a hesitant grin. Caden nodded like a miniature diplomat who'd been informed of Rowan's attendance beforehand. Rowan didn't wave dramatically. He simply smiled, warm, steady, present. As the performance unfolded, he clapped for every child, not just his own. He recorded carefully, making sure not to block anyone's view. He offered to help carry chairs after the event. No big gestures, just small actions, evidence of effort. Afterward, Caden tugged on his sleeve. "Did you like it?" "I loved it," Rowan said. Every part, even that single sentence meant everything to the boys. And Nyla noticed. Not with romantic longing, but with respect. Fatherhood didn't end at school events. Slowly, naturally, Rowan began integrating into the Charlotte community that raised the boys. It was unfamiliar territory, far removed from the polished circles he once dominated. He attended church picnics, neighborhood cookouts, Saturday literacy programs, and charity drives. Not because he wanted applause, no one there cared about his wealth, but because he needed to understand their world. A world shaped by support, a world shaped by connection, a world shaped by accountability. At first, the community was cautious. Some knew of him from news articles. Some recognized him from business networks. Many didn't know him at all. But they watched how he treated the boys, with gentleness, with attentiveness, with humility. They watched how he listened during discussions instead of dominating them. They watched how he respected boundaries and didn't demand access he hadn't earned. People began greeting him by name. Fathers invited him to join weekend activities. Mothers asked him to help with event setups, not because of his last name, but because he proved himself reliable. And reliability had always been the true currency of community. There were days when he struggled, days when he felt embarrassed for not knowing how to braid Micah's twist out properly, days when he didn't understand church cultural references, days when he felt out of place at community meetings where experiences differed from his upbringing. But he stayed. He learned. He listened. He grew. Rowan stopped trying to be impressive. He started trying to be present. He asked questions instead of assuming answers. He accepted corrections without defensiveness. He leaned into discomfort instead of escaping it. And each uncomfortable moment became a stepping stone. Learning to season chicken correctly for the cookout, helping fold chairs after a church event, taking parenting classes the community center offered, showing up at parent-teacher meetings even when the boys didn't expect him to. Every small act rewired something in him. This wasn't business strategy. This was fatherhood. This was character. This was the life he didn't know he needed. Despite the progress, the story didn't transform into a romance overnight. Nyla remained cautious. She welcomed his involvement in the boys' lives, but she kept emotional boundaries firm. She answered his questions kindly, but didn't indulge sentimentality. She respected his efforts, but didn't reward them with promises. He understood. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a process. Some days were smooth. Some days were tense. Some days she needed space. Some days he stumbled. But he stayed consistent. He didn't ask, "Where do we stand?" He let time do what rushing never could. Because true reconciliation isn't built on charm, it's built on proof. And slowly proof was forming between them like a bridge neither rushed across. 5 months after the summit, the twins and Singleton triplets' joint 6th birthday arrived, a celebration that filled the backyard with balloons, picnic tables, folding chairs, and rows of cupcakes lined like edible confetti. The weather was warm, sunlight wrapping the yard with a soft glow. Neighbors mingled. Children ran back and forth with superhero capes flapping behind them. Gospel music drifted gently from a speaker on the deck. Rowan stood near the grill, wearing an apron that didn't fit him stylishly at all, and that was precisely why the moment carried so much heart. He held the spatula nervously. "Are these supposed to flip this fast?" he asked one of the deacons. The deacon laughed. "Not unless you're trying to burn them, son." Rowan corrected himself awkwardly, flipping burgers with the cautious precision of someone performing heart surgery. The boys ran past him in a blur of joy. "Dad, we're racing," Silas shouted before realizing what he said. The word "dad" hung in the air. Not forced, not coached, not prompted. Spontaneous, natural, earned. Rowan's hands stilled. His breath caught, but he didn't react dramatically. He simply whispered, "I'm right here. Go win." The boys sprinted off. He blinked hard to keep his composure. From the deck, Nyla watched silently, not with romantic longing, not with nostalgia, with recognition of a man who was finally learning how to love through action, not entitlement. She sipped her lemonade slowly as she saw him kneel to help Micah tie his shoes, fumbling with the laces, laughing at himself, letting Micah teach him the right way. It was ordinary, beautifully ordinary, the kind of moment she once never dreamed he could grow into. As she watched him help their son, her chest softened, not with forgiveness fully formed, but with possibility. Possibility born from presence. possibilities shaped by humility, possibilities strengthened by time. As the birthday candles were lit and the children gathered to make their wishes, the narrator gently steps in to close the story with clarity. Rowan had wealth, status, visibility, but none of it mattered until character reshaped his life. Words opened the door, but actions built the pathway forward. Power impresses. Presence transforms. The boys didn't need a billionaire. They needed a father. Nyla stood unshaken because she refused to let his rejection determine her worth. And her strength became the foundation that rebuilt everything. As the candles flickered in the backyard and the children prepared to blow them out, two adults who once stood on opposite sides of pride now stood in quiet, steady alignment. No longer strangers, not yet reconciled lovers, but united as CEO parents discovering a new rhythm, a rhythm grounded in truth, a rhythm shaped by growth, a rhythm built on responsibility, not romance. And for now, that was enough. Before closing, the narrator turns warmly to the audience. If you believe stories should teach, uplift, and inspire, please like this video. Comment your biggest takeaway from this story. Subscribe to Mr. Heartstring Tales to experience more narratives that blend emotion with wisdom. And share this story with someone who needs a reminder that growth is possible, love is complex, and responsibility is powerful. Your engagement helps meaningful stories reach more hearts.